All right, so I'm wandering the streets of DC, of the swamp, with former Secretary of DHS Chad Wolf. The guy currently in your job is a guy that's become sort of a running joke, I think, partly to the country. I'm just speaking for myself.
Right.
And on my show, because of the eyebrows, you're sort of the reverse Mayorkas, I think. But really, this immigration issue has just, to me, trumped, no pun intended, all of the other issues at the moment. It must be sort of depressing for you to see what's going on right now, considering that you guys largely had this under control for 4 years.
Well, I think that's right. It's not only depressing, it's frustrating. It's not only myself, but the team at DHS under President Trump worked very hard to get, some semblance of control along that border, to bring control out of chaos. And it didn't happen overnight, right? We went through some difficult times in 2017, 18, and even 19, trying to get our hands around it. We tried some things that didn't work, but we found a lot of things that did work, particularly towards the end of the administration. And we were very proud of that. I think a lot of Americans agreed with us. They said, hey, we get some control over this thing. And of course, you saw all that go away on day one of the Biden administration. And it's very hard to look at what's going on because deep down, and not only just intuitively I know, and I think most Americans know, that what's going on along that border is just simply unfair. Mm-hmm. I think most Americans have a basic sense of fairness, and they're looking at folks just coming across that border that are being released in 24 to 48 hours with a plane ticket and housing, and they're just saying, that's not right. That's not right. And so there's a different way to do this. And we showed that during the Trump administration. I think hopefully there'll be some new leadership and we'll see a different way to go about it.
Can you talk a little bit about the structural nature of all of this?
Yeah.
So it starts, let's say, with the president setting the agenda, then Mayorkas, your former job, you're putting the policy into action. But I would imagine that as you go down the chain there, and we know this for a fact, that so many of these border agents, the people in charge, the people that are actually sending them across the borders and everything, they're not happy with what's happened.
No, they're not happy at all. A lot of this starts with the political leadership, not only at the presidential level, but at the secretary level. They set priorities. And DHS law enforcement, at the end of the day, they're going to do what their boss tells them to do. They're, very much like military. Mm-hmm. They'll salute, they'll do it. They won't like it, and they don't like it.
Yeah.
They've told me that. They've told other people that. I think they're frustrated because if you just let them do their job, and they're down there. They live in these communities. A lot of them have served for a decade, 2 decades. They know what to do to secure that border. But what the Biden administration has done is you basically put both hands behind their back. You've tied their hands and saying, well, you can't do this, 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 and this. You can only really do this. You can't remove anyone and everyone that should be removed. You can only remove this slice of people for ICE. And so when you put those types of handcuffs and limitations on law enforcement officers, and we see that, right? We see that here in the U.S. in big cities. Law enforcement not able to arrest. And even if they do arrest, then they're out on the streets, right? That has a morale impact. If you're a law enforcement professional, you want to be able to do your job, and you want to see that there's some consequence for you putting your life on the line every day. You put on that badge and you go out and you don't know if you're coming back to your family, and you want that to make a difference. And if you're a Border Patrol agent and you pick someone up and you just release them the next day, are you making a difference?
Can you talk about the sort of misnomer that the government or the federal government doesn't have the tools right now to do everything as it relates to the border? Because actually the last time I was in DC was during that quote unquote bipartisan deal that nobody thought was good. Yeah. And it was framed through the media as if they don't pass this deal, then there's nothing the president can do. But that's completely untrue.
Yeah, no, it is untrue. I think it's important to remember for the American people, your listeners and others, this crisis started under the Biden administration. They took 94 different executive actions on immigration in the first 100 days. That's what caused this crisis. It wasn't anything that the Senate did or Congress did. They didn't pass a law that created this crisis. Those executive orders and everything since then have caused this crisis. And guess what? They still have those same executive authorities that they could do today to solve the crisis. They won't do it, but what they're very good at...
So just to be clear, they could do everything you guys did right now.
100%. Yeah. We had no laws, I would say significant laws passed during the 4 years of the Trump administration that gave us new and unique authorities.
Right.
Once we figured out that Congress wasn't going to act, we started to look at what's the authorities and the abilities that we have to make an impact. And we did some unique things all within the cover of the law. Most got litigated, most came out in our favor. And so they have the ability to change course. They don't need Congress to act. You don't need the Senate to act. President Biden's job is to act and to do this, and he just refuses to do it.
Let me ask you one other thing, and then we'll let you go to work. How do you feel now that this has become, it's clearly becoming the issue that Trump ran on in 2016, build the wall, and everybody called him racist and all of that stuff. But to me now, it has become the wide 10 issue. Trump was just in the Bronx, and everybody there was talking about the illegals that are taking their jobs or, you know, overrunning the stores and the crime and the drugs and fentanyl. We all know all this stuff. So I guess a little better late than never, but to some extent, you guys must be kind of happy that we're here in a sort of intellectual sense.
Well, it's tough, right? You don't
Maybe not in a
you don't want to see this happening to the U.S. and to all these communities that are now suffering under the Biden administration's immigration policies.
But maybe we needed this to.
Yeah, I mean, I think really in my lifetime, I don't think you've seen a more black and white difference in a change of an administration than on the issue of border security and immigration enforcement. It is night and day, and it almost happened with a flip of a switch. And I think, you know, most Americans are seeing this, right? Because it's not necessarily the legacy media that's telling them this, but
no.
They're on social media. There's independent reporters. There's shows like yours and others that are doing a great job of getting this out. And I think most Americans are like, wait a minute, something is fundamentally broken here. That I have, you know, 11 million people that have come in this country over the last 3.5 years illegally, not even legal. That's not right, and something needs to be done about it. So I think Americans are waking up, but it's also that local impact, right? We just talked about a little bit, that local impact of American communities, this influx, the lack of social services. What does it do to your public education system? When you have 500,000 children trafficked into this country in the last 3.5 years, and if they all stay, guess where they're going into public education systems? English is not their first language, right? And so
and they're not being taught the right.
They're not being taught that.
Most of those
and so, what does that do to public education systems and teacher resources and things of that nature? That's the issue. I think a lot of Americans are waking up. Not, you know, in addition to the national security issues, it's the local impact that this illegal immigration and activity is having.
All right, one bonus question, which is, if we get Trump part 2, do you want you want the whole gig back? You want the whole gig
back?
Well, look,
it's always an honor to be asked to serve. Always happy to serve. I'm going to let the campaign and the candidate make his own choices.
That's the answer.
Yeah.